Welcome to this video series about improvising by Sietze de Vries. You can support this video series by donating the amount of your choice to Sietze de Vries' Patreon account, which can be found by searching Sietze de Vries Patreon or by finding the link in the description below the video. Enjoy the video.
So, like last time, we are at the beautiful Hillebrand organ in Veenhuizen, which has this tiny little rugpositief and a beautiful sound in a beautiful church. I want to talk a little bit more about harmony today, because like I said before, that is really the main key of being a good improviser. The better you harmonize, the more knowledge you have about different keys, the different chords, the better your improvising will be. And it makes sense, of course. Again, it's like a language. The more words you know, the bigger your vocabulary is, the more you know about the whole grammar of a language, the better you can express yourself. So it all starts with a lot of words that you should know, and then you can put them in the right order and maybe get creative with them. Well, let's start with a famous tune that probably everyone knows. This is of course the famous canon of Pachelbel, and well, most people like it a lot. That's why you hear it all the time at weddings and other occasions. And probably only some string players will hate it by now because they have to play it all the time. But actually the chords are rather beautiful. And what's the reason for that? Well, there is a very simple reason, and we talked about it last time already. The main thing of harmonizing is actually the 5-1 cadence. There is a reason that we all understand chords like this. And when you add the 7, so a dominant 7 chord, you could actually summarize this as a problem that you resolve. And that's actually what our brain likes to do. You see a problem, you start computing what can be done to solve the problem, and then when the problem is solved, we feel happy. And that's really in a nutshell what these chords are. So this canon is in D major, so first I play 1-5 in D major, and that's of course the triad of D and the triad of A. Makes complete sense. The next two chords are exactly the same, but now we don't think from D major anymore, but we think from B minor. And that makes sense, of course. B minor is the relative minor key of D major. So that also sounds perfectly fine. So that's B minor and F sharp minor. And then again we have a 1-5 cadence, but now in the subdominant key, which is G major, so 1-5. And then like a normal cadence, 4-5, and then the whole thing starts over again. So what you basically hear all the time is 5-1, 5-1, 5-1, 5-1. Little problem, it gets solved, we are happy. Alright, let's do something interesting with this idea, because what we also want to learn after a while is that we don't use chords all the time. If you use triads, it gives you a feeling of safety. You know exactly what you're doing, you know the chord you are playing, it sounds nice, and well, that's the end of it basically. But of course there's also beautiful music that's not all about chords, because you could say that if you think in chords, you are working vertically all the time. So that means you have a melody and underneath is a chord. So you basically think from the melody down to a chord. But of course you can think more horizontally as well, so that beautiful things happen. We already did a little bit of that when we had this little variation with a motive in the left hand. Well, we are going to work with that same idea, but now with the pattern that we just discovered with Pachelbel. And we use the same hymn tune we had last time, Herr Jesu Christ, dich, wend. Let's do it in G major now. So first I will play the hymn once more with a beautiful trumpet of this organ. So a variation would already be doing the exact same thing, but now with motives in the left hand, meaning you use motives like or broken triads, and then you already can make a very nice variation. But you can make bicinium out of this, so only two voices. So I can solo out on the second manual, and now I leave the trumpet on the first manual, but I can only play one voice. And of course now you have the interesting problem that you need to fill in things, that you play motives again or broken triads, so that it sounds like harmony. So a good option is what we just did, but now with the solo stop, something like this. And of course it's very interesting that our brain tells us all the time that we hear harmony. And you don't hear harmony, you just hear two voices. But still, your brain just fills in all the blanks. That's really interesting how that works. But to make this into a real bicinium, it would be nice if we have, again, kind of a ritornello in between the lines, like we did before in the choral prelude. And let's use the idea of Pachelbel, and in G major, that means that we have a bass line like this. And if you just make it more interesting by using a few motives, something like this. Then you have basically an idea that Boehm used as well. And it's very easy, it's basically the 1, 5, and then in E minor, the 1, 5, or 6, 3 from G major, and then 4, 1, and then, well, you can actually fill it in however you want, as long as you have a strong cadence at the end, like. So 4, 5, 1 at the end is always good, because that gives you a very clear pattern that you can repeat all the time. Well, let's see what happens if we make a little bicinium like this. And the trick to practice this is that you first make sure you can play the ritornello in different keys. So you noticed that the second to last line I ended in B minor, which is again the relative minor key of D major, which is of course the dominant key of G major. So it all makes sense once you get the connections. And then you practice how can you play that ritornello in the style of Pachelbel or Böhm in B minor. And a little trick that you can always use as long as you have parallel thirds. So it always sounds good because you hear triads all the time, and you can even put motives on it. So when you're not sure what to do, that's a trick you can always use, and that combination of knowing exactly which triads you play, and that's basically still 1, 4, 5, but in different keys, and also using sometimes the idea of a parallel third, which is basically still triads, but then in inversion. So instead of having, for example, a D major chord as a 5 in root position, which doesn't sound good when it's only two voices, you play it in inversion, so the F sharp is below the. And of course it's easier said than done, so you need to practice that a lot, and you can actually first copy the examples that I give. Hopefully you can see my hands a little bit too, and then you try to do different things and try it in different keys and try it on different hymn tunes. There are a lot to choose from, and of course stay with the short simple hymns at first, and I will put some more examples of those hymns on my Patreon account. And then you give it a try and see how far you get, because when you can do this, a bicinium with two voices, and it sounds interesting, then you are actually quite a good improviser already, because you use both the vertical and the horizontal thinking. Well, just for fun, let's also end this part with a nice idea that I use the triads again, but now with a walking left hand to show off the beautiful plenum sound of this organ.